Oh, aha! I got it back to the front screen just in time. No one will ever remember that I advanced the screen too quickly. Oh wait, I just said it. All right. Welcome to azPHP. We kind of already did some introductions, but if you missed that opportunity and you want to take it now, or if you have jobs or are looking for jobs, go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we are. I'm trying to remember if it's anything PHP. Yeah, we are, but Golang and React. Anyone? I work for a company called Sluker Healthcare Solutions, sluker.com. We have opening for various positions. We saw this posted. Engineering team lead. Got some DevOps engineers because they're just so hard to find right now and keep. And then some Golang and React.
Cool. Well, if anyone knows someone, let them know. Anyone else with something to share tonight? All right, move on. azPHP is sponsored by Pagely. They provide our both physical and virtual meeting space, depending on what's going on. Many of us are on Slack these days, on the xdev's Slack workspace and the PHP channel. If you are not there and want to get there, let Gordon know because he knows how to actually get you there. But it's fun. Come talk with us. Oh, we have a Discord now. This is new. This is new, Gordon. Do you have something to say about this? I didn't put this slide here.
I did. Yeah, I've been talking to Ian Littman, and I'll get to a little bit more about what we talked about soon. But there is a Discord for the PHP community in general, and probably a lot more people on it. So if you're interested, actually, I'm going to post the link into the Zoom chat. And if you want to get on there, great. If not, whatever.
Cool.
And it's not the PHP Fig group?
It is not the PHP Fig group, no.
No, I think I have seen that before. I need to get on Discord more. But I know they were doing, a lot of the conferences have been doing Discord channels for the conferences as well. So it's gaining popularity with different events and meetups.
It was very convenient for Longhorn.
Announcements. Yes, meetups will continue online for now until maybe sometime next year. like we said earlier, we'll see. PHP 8.1 RC4 is out. So I think we've advanced one more RC since last time, or two, I can't remember. But yeah, it's getting close. We are going to mess around with some PHP 8.1 tonight. So that'll be fun. Merge PHP. Gordon,
Yeah.
you want to talk about that one, or do you want to wait till you're lunch?
No, it's fine. Yeah, so Ian and I were talking on Meetup Chat and moved to Discord because Meetup Chat sucks, about what other groups are doing. And I got to go to one of their Merge PHP meetups at Longhorn, which was pretty fun. So what it is currently is mainly the Austin and Boston, they rhyme, PHP groups are have kind of joined because of pandemic, blah blah blah, and they are just doing a single meetup now for joined for both groups. It is usually on the second Thursday of every month. So, and one issue for us would be
Time.
because they're free. Yeah, exactly. It's like when all of us are usually getting off of work. So that can be a little bit tricky, but I've been talking with Ian. He might make it more of kind of a long meeting, and at that point we could join as we are ready, and yeah, we might miss the presentation, but hey, we get to hang out with our peeps, so that would be fun. So that's Merge PHP.
Cool. Yeah, definitely want to talk about that
And
some more later.
as I get more information about it, I will definitely be posting it on Facebook and blah blah blah, all the normal spots.
Sweet. Any other announcements that anyone else can think of? Yeah, me neither. All right. So what we're doing tonight. Oh, this changed a little bit, didn't it? Oh well.
You can fix it.
My presentation is kind of scary. So Chris is going to give us a little what's new in Laravel presentation, brief one, and Gordon's going to talk about Longhorn PHP. And then, despite what the third bullet says, yesterday evening, I decided that I would put something together. So we're going to do some live coding. And it was hard to come up with a name for what exactly we're doing, but it has something to do with the composite design pattern and PHP 8.1. So we'll just go from that point when we get there. But Chris, you want to take over here and talk about what's going on in the Laravel community?
Sure. Should work.
And if anyone wants to do a what's new in anything else at another meetup, let me know.
Can you see my screen? Is it sharing? Did
It
it
is now.
work?
Yep.
All right. So, okay, my cats are fighting right next to me. Yep, so this is just a quick synopsis of a couple new things in Laravel as of recent. Nothing specific to any one specific version, but at least it's not all specific to one version. And let's take it away. First off, I've got just a Laravel PHP application here. And let's go check out the first thing. Laravel, one of the most relatively recent new development in Laravel is that they now have PHP 8.1 support.
And that's actually a pretty big deal because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter that work on libraries and frameworks that said this is actually one of the harder releases that they've had to deal with. There's some backwards incompatible stuff.
And I think worked on a lot of that too. There was some chatter on their Slack about getting 8.1 support into some of their components.
Yep.
Yeah, this was announced just like a couple of days ago. Yeah, so and that's good news because I mean PHP 8.1 is due out next month, right? Late next month. So we'll have that ready to go.
Chris is only looking forward for the enums.
I mean, that's definitely something I'm super excited about. The next, somewhat new feature, probably a month or so old at this point, is something called prevent lazy loading. So if we go here to this URL, I've got here what I've got set up is I've got some basic models set up here with a relationship from a user model which has n number of posts and a post which can have n number of comments, and you might see a typical application where you do some query to get you go to navigate to a URL, get your user model from there, and then you can send that to your view. And I've got a just basic view file here where we're displaying the user's posts, and it's a simple for each user's post. Show the post title and the body, and then for each post we show the post comments. For each post as comment, show the comment body. We can see that here, for example. So Lisa Windler's post, there's a title, body, and the comments. It's pretty straightforward. What you'll notice here is that this uses relationships. So again, a user has posts. You can see a user has posts, post has comments, and that's how we get those displayed here. So we pass the user in, then the user, we call user posts, and we call post comments. Normally in Laravel app, this will work just fine, but what you're doing here is something called lazy loading, which is when you first pass in the user here, it doesn't have any of its relationships loaded. And it has to, when you then call user posts, it then has to do an additional query to pull in those posts. And then additionally, when you call post comments, that has to do an additional query to pull in its comments. This is, in most cases, works fine. Like your application will work, but it can quickly cause slowdowns to your application. So recently, this lazy loading prevention was added, and in which you can, to do that, you go to your service provider, and you can enable this this by calling model prevent lazy loading. So if we go ahead and enable that, let's see what happens here when we try to load that page. We now get this exception that's called says attempt to lazy load comments on our model posts, but lazy loading is disabled. So what this does is it stops you from accidentally lazy loading and accidentally causing these additional database queries. And it forces you at that point to eager load those, and you can do that by calling either if you've already got a model, you can call load, so user load, and then we're going to tell it to load posts, and then also those posts, we want the comments of that post. We're going to eager load all the posts and comments of this user. Now, of course, and that fixes our problem. Of course, this is not ideal in a production environment when you just want this to work. So what they also give you is the ability to add a parameter here that says, and it defaults to true. And this is whether or not lazy loading is enabled. And what you can do here is say something like app, actually in this case where I have app, and check the environment, say if we're in like local, then only then will we enable prevent lazy loading. So that way we get warned when we accidentally are lazy loading variables when we're developing locally, but when you're in a production environment, it will let it slip through if you've accidentally missed it. Next is a very new feature. I think this one just came out a week ago, is this isList method, which basically emulates the new to PHP 8.1 array isList function. So you may see array isList. This is a new function coming to PHP 8.1, which will determine if array is a list. And a list in this context means that the array, all array keys are sequential integers starting from 0 and does not have any gaps in between. So the reason I mention this is because it was authored by somebody pretty awesome. But anyways, as you can see here, what we got
I know that
is so what this does for us is it gives us the ability to use the array is list functionality in Laravel ahead of time before without being on PHP 8.1. But with this, so we can see here, I've got a couple different arrays defined. I've got a single array. This one should be considered in a list because it's just values, meaning it'll automatically give them indexes 0, 1, 2. This is an associative array, so these indexes are statically defined as strings, so this one won't be a list. We have a numerically indexed array, but we're missing the second index here, so this should not be considered a list. And then anything with mixed indexes should not be considered. So if you take a list, I'm just dumping out whether or not each of those are a list. as we can see, the list is array, associative list is not, this non-sequential array is not, and the mixed list is not. Another relatively new feature, this one came with version 8.6.5, which was released maybe, I think that was last week, is the ability to configure a dedicated logging channel for deprecations. So what we can do is if we go here to this, what I have here is in our user model, I've added a get post method, which triggers an user deprecated warning. And other than that, it should still work. This should still work if we go here and navigate here. But that just dumps out our things, our post for that user. However, if we go to if we go to our logging config file, you can see this this new log channel. It's called log deprecations channel. By default, it's set to null. But if we go to our environment file and enable this, and we're going to set it, I've also set up a logging deprecations channel, log channel, to specifically log deprecation warnings to a dedicated deprecations.log file. So if we go ahead and enable that in our environment file again, we go ahead and enable that. We reload this page. What we'll see here is in our storage logs deprecations log file, we actually get those deprecation warnings logged out to that file, which is very convenient for letting you track when something has deprecation, is throwing deprecation warnings. Because in every given app, you may have dozens of libraries, and unless you're specifically looking for warnings, which a lot of people don't actively track warnings because they don't indicate an actual problem with your app, just a potential problem down the line. This will help you kind of congregate those to a central location and see those easily. And lastly is this lazily refresh database trait. Anybody who's worked with Laravel is intimately familiar, and they work on tests, is probably intimately familiar with the refresh. Where am I looking at? Models, post-test, user test. Is intimately familiar with the refresh database trait. That is, given you want to run a test, but your test needs to set up some data and log some data to a database, or put some data in a database, or interact with data in your database, you have to set up that database for your tests, and between each test case, refresh that database. That is, wipe out the existing data and reset up all your migrations so that way the structure is correct. So any test prior to recently that you've ever wanted in Laravel to interact with your database, you have to use this, add this refresh database trait to. And for example, in this test, we are creating a number of posts and then just asserting that they're in the database. So if we run our test suite, this will work because we are refreshing the database. However, if we go into these tests and remove this refresh database trait from them, they won't work because you no longer have a database that you're interacting with. What you can do here now is in your base test case, there's this new lazily refresh database trait. And if we set that once on our base test case, that all our tests that hit the database will extend. It will allow us to, without having to find anything on that, it will automatically refresh the database at the time it needs to access the database. So these are just it's a convenience feature to write less boilerplate in all your test classes. And that is all I have for now for some recent stuff in Laravel. There's a ton of new things other than this that have come out recently. I know something that, how do I stop sharing? I think I stopped sharing. Did I stop sharing? Something I know Jeremy had mentioned when he asked me to do this was something called Laravel Octane, which admittedly I don't have much actual experience with, so haven't had the time to actually look into and give any real info on. But that's it's a new feature that lets you define on a per route basis the ability to kind of boot on a per route basis. You can basically skip a lot of the framework overhead because it loads the framework into memory and reuses a bunch of that framework code on each request. That's just another one of the big things recently that's came out that I didn't have any time to go into. There's a ton of others. For this, to keep up to date on these kind of things, there's Laravel, I think it's laravel-news.com, yes, which is a good site for keeping up to these. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think Gordon's next.
Yep. So yeah, I was supposed to talk about Longhorn, which was a lot of fun. Marissa joined me there, and I know there were a few other people in Arizona that were
I made it
there either virtually or in person. Unfortunately, someone forgot their notes at the office and schedule and everything. So specifics were on there, but it was a lot of fun. It was awesome to see a lot of the people I've met before many years ago. Like all the old guard there. It was great. You get to hang out with them, and I really hope more conventions start happening in person soon. Trying to think of any specific. I mean, there was a lot of push for static analysis in a lot of the presentations I saw. Having recently moved towards management, there were a couple of sessions that were on the management side, which I'm not even going to bother talking about, but I believe a lot of the sessions were recorded and are going to eventually be online, but and I will definitely be posting links once I find out when those will be. Marissa, was there any sessions that stood out to you, or any that you liked?
A couple of sessions that stood out to me that I actually didn't go to, that I wish I had, because I went to other ones that I thought were going to be more interesting than they were things like the bootstrapping a business on $2 a day per customer, which was very interesting sounding. And then there was also a very detailed.
I wanted to see that one. That's
Rockability.
Yeah, what's her name? She's hilarious. It's her husband.
Yeah, I know her.
Snipe.
I know her by
IT.
Snipe. So
yeah.
her nickname.
That was his first presentation that he's done at a conference.
Yeah, and apparently he did really well. And I'm kind of sad I didn't go. But the one that I did go to that was at the exact same time was also pretty interesting though, which was the open telemetry, I think that's what it was called. It was a talk about open telemetry and using, or not just collecting metrics, but actually, yes, open telemetry is what it was called. And it's got a PHP library that's currently in alpha, and there's libraries for all sorts of other things. And then you can have, then there's an open source collector as well. But it's not just metrics, but also like observability and like, how do you take your metrics and actually break it down into useful stuff? And it was really interesting because it was a talk from someone from Scout, which their product is an observability platform, and yet they didn't, he mentioned, oh yeah, Scout does this, but also the rest of the talk was completely about open telemetry, which was a very interesting thing to have experienced, because as soon as I realized that this was a Scout person, I was like, oh, okay, we're just going to be talking about Scout in this, but no.
Yeah, long commercial.
It was not a commercial, in fact, and yeah, that was great. But yeah, open telemetry looked really interesting, and it's something I don't want to look more into. So it goes beyond like just collecting metrics with Prometheus or whatever, and actually like tracking everything that's going on in your system, so in your project, in an open source fashion, as opposed to all of these closed source tools that are out there.
And so open telemetry itself is a standard, right?
Yes.
And then pretty much all the big people in that space are now supporting that standard along with whatever they had, as a proprietary solution before.
Yeah, so OpenTelemetry is the standard, and then there's a bunch of tools and SDKs and whatnot built around it. And so you can use OpenTelemetry to talk to Scout, for example, or to talk to Datadog potentially. I'm not sure if that one, but Scout for sure. But you can also, but there's also like open source collectors. So you can do everything that Scout does in an open source fashion, hosted yourself for free.
Just on you to keep yourself from getting DDoSed.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, all the benefits and all the downsides of that. So that was probably one of the most interesting talks that I can remember. That's the one that stood out to me the most. The other one that I really liked was a talk about accessibility, because there was some of the stuff in that talk, like I already knew going in, but then there was a lot of things that I just did not know about or didn't know how to actually tackle, and they were able to, answer my questions about it. And yeah, so their talk was really good. And not to, there were a lot of other interesting things that were talked about, but I think those were my two standouts, aside from the closing keynote, which was very interesting. It was a discussion about how to use I'm blanking on the social engineering to build a better team. So social engineer your colleagues to become better friends with them and to work better with them. And that was kind of the, like, she used an example of like social engineering to get a key card for a hotel so you can get into some room that's not yours. But also, here's how you would apply the exact same things to your teammates to make sure that things are going as smoothly as possible. And it was an interesting talk, and it was a very, very good closing keynote. And hands down the best speaker there, in my opinion. A lot of really good speakers.
Who did that one?
Sorry?
Who did that one?
Too many names for me to remember, and I'm terrible with names, so give me a second. Do you remember, Gordon?
No, I don't have the schedule up.
Well, I can look at it later.
Yeah. I also went to both of Sarah Goldman's presentations. If you ever get a chance to go to her presentations, you will definitely learn something, especially if you're interested in anything like PHP internals wise. Like, you will learn something weird about how PHP processes something, or yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's guaranteed an entertaining talk.
To answer your question, Jeremy, Olivia Liddell.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
There was a really good talk that I went to that was on Unicode and kind of how PHP handles it and how you have to think about supporting it and dealing with it in applications, because by default PHP is essentially just based off of your run-of-the-mill ASCII. So
because PHP 6 didn't happen,
right?
Well, so like Unicode, if you want to start counting like the length of a Unicode string, the strlen function will give you a different value than the MB strlen, because technically the string length is counting the standard ASCII characters and the actual bytes there. That's all it's doing, is just counting bytes. The MB actually goes into looking at, okay, what modifiers do I have on it? So it'll give you a different number. And then there's a third function that I'm drawing a blank on that actually gives you the true length of a Unicode.
Oh man.
So it was interesting. I wish I would have had that presentation like 6 months ago, because I've been dealing with Unicode and text extraction and scraping and everything else for the last 6 months. So it would have been really nice to have had a little bit better understanding of how PHP did that, and how it kind of interacts. But it was a deep dive into what Unicode is, how it's structured, the old ASCII tables. I mean, it was a lot to digest, but it was really interesting.
Ling encodings is so much fun.
Yay!
Another talk that I will admit was probably not the best talk there. It was his first time giving that talk, and he went in saying, "Hey, I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes in this talk," which he did, but it was fine. But the thing about it that really struck me as interesting was the xdev API for MySQL. I had never heard about, and I was very confused, which is why I went to that talk. And turns out that MySQL is now basically also MongoDB as well. But you have to use the xdev API, which is a new way to interact with it that uses protobus to interact with the MySQL database. And if you use MySQL 8 or newer and you use xdev API, you basically have a query builder built in instead of having to just write raw SQL with PDO. And you have like functionality from like MongoDB kind of stuff with NoSQL, collections, and a few other things like that, which I had never heard of xdev API. It is a very weird name for a tool that is built out of a company such as Oracle, but it was actually really interesting. And the other interesting note that I had from that is that PDO is not kept up to date if you're using MySQL. If there are security or bug issues in PDO for MySQL, they will not get fixed in any timely manner. They will only get fixed if a dev at either someone else outside of Oracle decides, hey, I can fix this, or if an Oracle dev is bored. There is no one that's dedicated to PDO, but there are people at Oracle dedicated to MySQLi and xdev API. So if you're using PDO, it is inherently less secure than using MySQLi or xdev API purely because it's not going to be getting security updates in any timely fashion.
Does the xdev API allow you to interact with the regular MySQL instance, or is it only the document store?
No, it allows you to interact with regular SQL as well. And you can break out into just writing a SQL query as well, but it by default is a query builder. The one thing I will note about xdev API is that unless you have a highly scaled up environment, it is half as fast as using MySQLi or PDO.
Wow.
Like it is slow. So just keep that in mind about xdev API. It's also relatively new. It came out, I think you said 2 years ago.
Yeah, it seems like something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, so it'll probably get faster, but right now it's really slow. But it has the most people working on it, has the biggest team. He said that MySQLi, this was, mind you, the guy who was giving this talk was from Oracle himself, and he works on the xdev.
Yeah, is that Dave? Probably.
Yeah, Dave Stokes.
Yep.
Yeah, so and he said that the xdev API's team is 4 times bigger than the MySQLi team, and the MySQLi team is infinitely bigger than the PDO team because there is no PDO team. It's the xdev API is under heavy development, and it's something that's worth keeping an eye on. Probably, unless you actually need the features it has right now, it's probably not a good idea to be switching to it. But just because it's slower. It is also it is also inherently more secure than MySQLi because I forgot his explanation for it, but it uses because it's using protobus, it has better encryption stuff going on. And since it's all HTTP, it's if you're using TLS 1.3, then you're using TLS 1.3 for this as well, and so on and so forth.
So when you say more secure, you mean theoretically more secure, not like practically more secure?
Yes, theoretically.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if it's also using protobus, that means it's strongly typed as well, which means SQL injection is probably not a thing.
Oh yeah, no, it's
Gotcha.
impossible to do a SQL
Yeah.
injection attack because it will not. It will. Well, I won't say impossible. No, it's
That's
definitely
right. Crappy sequel.
because well, I mean, you're not writing any SQL, but I mean, I guess you can, but it's definitely possible to do SQL injection if you're just string interpolating. That's always a possibility. But that said, because of its query builder and everything like that, and because it's using protobus, it doesn't actually send SQL queries. And so if you write raw SQL, it doesn't actually send that SQL query. It parses out the SQL query and then sends the protobus.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So because it has to do that, it has that validation for you. Now, if you string interpolate, there's always a chance something will squeak by. But if you use it actually how it's supposed to be used, where you do like, here's the name of the column, and then you pass in a variable, then it will do a lot of that stuff for you.
Yeah.
And then it also still has the same, like, you can write like a where clause of like column name equals question mark, and then provide in a value in a separate, So you have all of that kind of functionality, but it's much more difficult to have a SQL injection.
Is MySQL a lot faster than PDO, or they're roughly the same in performance perspective?
He found that he showed some benchmarks, and he found that MySQLi is faster on slower machines, and PDO is faster on beefier machines. But it's like less than 100 millisecond difference between the two. So it's probably not going to be something that's making or breaking anything. MySQLi is slightly faster if you don't have a powerful host, though. So
Thanks.
And yeah, that one was interesting just because of the like stuff I had never heard about, which wasn't even the point of the talk. The point of the talk was comparing like performance and how well they're maintained and whatnot, but I had never heard of xdev API, and that was a really interesting thing to learn about, so I thought I'd share.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chris, Gordon, and Marissa. Let's do some code. Okay. Yeah, sound good. All right. Let me share the screen. Is that the right one? Okay. How's the font size?
Little tiny.
Okay. I don't remember how to do it. Here's a zoom.
Probably Control Plus.
No, that's a search. No, that's on smart text editors.
You type shift increase if you're desperate. Shift and then increase.
What?
Are you not? What are you? Are you not?
Oh,
Storm?
yeah, duh. Okay.
Yeah, increase, and then there's like an increase. Yeah,
There we go. That
do like
works.
5 times. Yeah.
Cool. That a little bit better? One more time. Good. Not good.
Looks fine to me.
Okay. All right. So what I have here is kind of the driver for what we're going to build. But at work recently, I was working on refactoring a very large file full of many functions that validates domains based on rules. And the rules themselves are stored in a database for the application that it's validating domains for. And then it reads those in. It does, it looks up the domains that are currently active and then compares them with the rules using magic, and then determines if they're valid or not. So like, why does it exist? Well, basically, Pagely is a hosting company of sorts, right? So we don't control everyone's domains, and they can change stuff without letting us know. And so the validation is what we use to find out if they change things without telling us, among other things. So that part isn't necessarily important, but as writing the code for it, and so I noticed as I was doing it that I kind of worked in some design patterns just totally unintentionally. One of those is called the composite pattern. Let's see if can I do does Zoom have a whiteboard?
I don't think so. Maybe.
You can
It
do
does.
annotation.
Yeah, I'll just do that.
It does.
Um,
I think it's only for paid accounts. So
So the idea of a composite, something else to draw into, a composite design pattern is you basically have do I need to? I guess I don't even need to. You have no, yeah, no, this is right. Whoa. Okay, text is funky here. So we're gonna have something called a rule. You'll see that. Oh gosh, make it stop. And have a record rule and a rule set. And we've got some arrows here. It's really hard to draw. Oh, man. Where's the lines? There we go. So both record rule and rule set inherit from rule, but rule set also contains record rules. I can draw the labels in, but does everyone understand how it's going? So there's basically, they both inherit the same object. This one's like a collection of these, but because they both inherit the same object, you can write code that is polymorphic to work with either the collection or the single version of these things. And so where you see this really commonly is in tree like structures, where you have some nodes that contain other nodes and then some nodes that are just leaves. And so that is basically how rules are structured. And I think I can clear this, clear all. How do I exit? There we go. No. Here, okay, amount of annotation now. So we have these rules. And in terms of what they look like as a serialized format, it's something along these lines. There's the outermost one is a collection of rules. A collection of rules has an operator which can either be all or any. All means that in order for that rule to be considered valid, all of the rules under it have to be valid as well. And if it's any, then at least one has to be valid when you actually compare it with the records, the DNS records. And so there can be additional rule sets under there, and then those can have rules too, or they can be right there. So you got this tree structure, and the composite design pattern is really good at representing this type of structure when you actually turn it into objects. So When we go ahead and write the code, this is basically what we're trying to accomplish. So we have something that's called a validator. We're going to use two objects in here that we're not actually going to really implement, but they're going to be treated as dependencies that they would have some, specific logic in there if we were actually doing them. So we'll put those, we'll give those, inject those into the validator. Normally in a project, like you would be doing, something like container make or get, validator class. And, that's how you'd get the validator. But we're just doing it old school right here. You have the rules. We're hydrating that rules into a tree of objects. And then we call the validator with the top level domain and the rules, and it does all of the validating, and it returns a new version of the rules that contain information about it being which parts are valid and which aren't. And that way we can put that new rule object, save that back into the database, and replace or update our records. All right, everyone with me? I know Gordon is, because he reviewed some code like this a couple days ago.
Because I admit I wrote the original stuff that you had to read. Sorry.
Would it be fair to compare this to like request validation rules?
I'm sure it's similar. I mean, a lot of rule structures, especially that are recursive in nature, are
I'm not saying saying that it's necessarily implemented this way, but that kind of what it would solve that kind of problem.
If you're familiar with, I think it's called respect validator, which is what we use, that actually is implemented this way as well. So if you wanted to see like a full project that's implemented this way, you could definitely look at respect. As soon as Jeremy was describing it, I was like, oh, this is respect.
So we're not going to care too much about the specifics of the contents that we're validating, but more so the structure of the code that allows this to all work. And we're going to do some 8.1 stuff here. And so let's I kind of am tempted to just put it all in one file, right? But okay, let's grab this guy. Let's start with some enums, right? Because we're in 8.1. You saw that the any and all, right? So we could implement that as an enum. Let's see. I think I'm using this namespace. So I set up Composer already. It has the namespace configured and PSR log as a dependency. And then I have some shell scripts to run things in Docker, which is where PHP 8.1 is. But this is not a Docker talk, nor would I be the best person to give it. Oh, so enum. Enum in 8.1. Enum is a new keyword. And it's still kind of like a class in most respects. Except most enums by default are basically integers under the hood with a class around it, basically. But you can back your enums with strings if you like by doing this. That way you can use the enum as a string and it will resolve to the string value that you want. Kind of like how we use constants for enums these days. So we can create any and all as our enum values. And then we have a nice little enum there that we can use. Another enum that we'll need, and this will be related to the record type. And you don't have to, in reality, there's a ton of these, but we only need to do a few for the purposes of the demo. So these are all the different types of DNS record types. And we'll just do those three, but there's probably what, close to 10 others, I think. I can't remember. So there we go. We have 2 enums. Those are good to go. I think, how do we want to approach this? Do you want to start with models or do you want to start with dependencies? I usually like to do models first.
I was gonna say models.
So these are not coming directly from the database. But there's like a JSON structure that does come from the database that we then hydrate into these models. At least that's how it works. On the project I'm doing, it works. So I'm kind of just emulating that. So like our little drawing earlier, we have a rule, and let's grab these because I'm lazy. Okay, and we also have a rule set and a record rule, which is for the single leaf node of the group. And these are going to extend rule, such as with our composite pattern. All right, and let's get some cool stuff going here with PHP 8.1. So there's a smattering of PHP 8 and 8.1 stuff here. So some stuff I'm going to copy and paste in just due to time, but look at some of these. So in PHP 8, we have a constructor value promotion. So we can do something like this. So I'm creating a variable that tracks whether or not the rule is valid, which both the child classes need. In PHP 8.1, though, we're going to make this even cooler because instead of making something private and having getters, that's lame. We're going to make it public and make it read only. Ooh, shiny. I messed around with this recently, and when it says read only, I mean it means like read only, like not just to outside of the class, but inside of the class too. If you try to set the value anywhere outside of the constructor, you will get an error. So it is very, very read only. So with the constructor promotion, this, instead of having to write this as a separate line, it just promotes that for us, which is kind of cool. In this base class, I'm also going to do this because we want a way to serialize this back to an array when we need to. Okay. Record rule, do that one. So this one's kind of fun. I'm going to copy this one. Then we'll look at it in a second. All right. So again, I'm using all these read-only. I have the valid one that I'm feeding into the parent constructor. Here is type hinting for the enum right there, just cool. So that's like, I mean, that's like the big win for enums, right? Is we can type in them now, and now we don't have to validate the actual values because it just happens. Yay, it's nice. Then toArray here is pretty standard, except I'm filtering out anything that's null when I turn it into an array value, because it is pointless to have the null values within the content for the database. So that's just a design decision that I made. Okay, so, oh, sorry. Just, yeah, for the sake of understanding the business logic here, prefixes like dot or www or whatever the subdomain is. Dot means the root domain. The record type is, you know, whether it's a name server record, A record, CNAME record. Expected value is basically what we were saying that we, what we're saying, this is what it should be, this is what we're expecting it to be. And then when we actually look at the real domain and resolve it down to either, you know, the domain or the IP, it should match this in some way. But we're not going to actually implement that logic, so it's not that important. The current value is what we actually saw when we looked up the real domain, and valid is whether it's valid. So these two are important for us to store in the database, but when like you initially create rules, like you would know these values. They would just, they would become populated during a validation. Rule set, I grab this one. Okay, this one I want to be an iterator type of object, since it's a collection. So I'm going to implement iterator aggregate and countable, so it can be counted too. If there's something you're unfamiliar with regarding those, go ahead and ask questions. That's totally fine. I'm going to paste my implementation for the basics here in. So again, we're using the constructor property promotion and read only. The operation type was the other enum that we did with the any and all. There's an array of rules, so that's our composition or our composite. We have rule set contains rule records. They both inherit from rule. And then there's the valid again, which goes to the parent class. Here's a simple iterator implementation. In the past, a lot of people just return like a new array iterator with the things. I don't actually like that because it creates a whole bunch of memory for no reason, just to pass data through like twice, because you have to pass it and then store it, and it's pointless. So I like to use generators, because then it's just you're just iterating right from within this class. So that use the yield keyword, and just you know, this ends up returning a generator object, which acts the same as any other kind of iterator. Count is easy, of course, and toArrays looks the same as the other one. The only difference would be that we are going to recursively do toArray with the items, with the rules that we have. All right, and then to make this easier within the code, so notice I have from array here. So with, I actually have from array factories for everything. And on the base class, I do this. So I can actually return either of my child classes. And that goes along with the static return type, which is new and PHP 8. Maybe it's 8.1, I can't remember. But you can actually type in with the late static binding instead of it being either inferred or not working, which is the two options you have right now. And so that's nice. I'm glad that they added that. That actually kind of removes a whole class of problems that I've bumped into on occasion. For record rule, you need from array. Yes. So here's some cool stuff too. So as a PHP 8, I believe, throw can be treated as an expression, which means you don't have to like have a separate if statement to throw something. You can just do like, hey, this or throw, and it doesn't break anything. Of course, it doesn't return anything either. It just throws and you go about your business. But it actually saves pretty much 3 lines of code in every case by letting you do that. Here's also another awesome thing about enums is that they have a from method built in to enums where you can pass in a value that you think is a part of the enum, and then it actually creates the instance of the enum object for you. So, in our case, this would be like, from this would return the same thing as if you were to type, oops. That on its own. That's pretty cool. Now it will throw an exception if the value doesn't exist, but there's also another version built in to enums called try from, which will just return null instead. So depending on what level of alarm you need, you can either use from, which will throw an exception, or try from, which will return null. Okay, so yeah, that's some pretty cool stuff. I think it cleans up a lot of code, in my opinion. So I like those features. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, enums are relevant one. I think the throw one is 8, so I think you can use that one now if you're on 8. All right, so we have some models following the composite design pattern. The to array is recursive here. We need the from array for this one, so that our driver code can be created. So this one also uses that from for the enums, and then I'm also doing an array map. Oh yeah, this is another feature I really like. So this also recursively does from array from the rule set too. So here I'm doing, hey, if there's rules, use them, otherwise throw. But then that's also in an array map. And if you can take any function in PHP 8.1, and if you pass in just ... it returns a closure of that function. This is what they call it, first class callables, is what they call that feature. So instead of having to write, for example, something like this with, you know, the array tuple that represents a callable that has never been any kind of type safe ever. You now get type safety on referencing methods by using ... But you can also do like, you know, trim ... You know, if you were like doing array map, trim ... bunch of strings. Oops. Like you can use those first class callables with just any function, any type of function, anything that is a callable, you can turn it into a first class callable with using just ...
In the example of trim, like trim generally takes 2 parameters. Like, do you have the ability to specify the second parameter?
That's a good call. No, but there was an RFC for that did not pass, unfortunately. Yeah, so yeah, I guess trim is actually kind of, well, there is a default arg for trim. That makes sense. But yeah, for anything that's not arity 1, so you know, more than one argument, then you still have to kind of finagle it a little bit. But I think this is a pretty big win for the first iteration of what that could be.
And for the record, the partial application, which is the RFC that Jeremy was talking about there, they are going to try it again for PHP 8.2.
Oh, good. Yeah, I know Larry is very driven to make that happen. So
same with the pipe operator. They're going to try it again for 8.2.
Yeah, those would both be awesome.
What was the holdup with the first class callables with multiple parameters?
I think it was the implementation.
Okay.
Well, no, it was.
Yeah, I didn't read all of the insides of that, so I could be wrong.
It was 2 parts. I did read most, like 98% of the chats on it, but there were 2 reasons that people voted no. The first one is that it was because people could not find a point in having it without the pipe operator, and people could not find the point of the pipe operator because PHP is not a functional language.
Says who?
Which is ridiculous considering we already have people building out pipe operators in using objects, like what we have in Laravel.
Yeah.
Second, the other big reason that people voted against it was because the implementation was a little messy, and they felt it was going to be too hard to maintain. But they had said the voting had already started whenever they actually submitted a cleanup of it. And at that point, people were just saying it's too late now, I'm voting no, even though the code was cleaned up and all of their issues were already resolved. So that's why they're going to try it again for 8.2, because it's like, well, your complaints about it, messy code is all fixed now. So
cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
But you still have, I think it was like more than half of the people were voting against it because they felt it was too linked to the pipe operator. They felt it relied too much on having the pipe operator, and
I'd use it without the pipe operator.
I would too, and
right.
I don't know why that's even an issue, but you know. And then one of the big complaints for the pipe against the pipe operator was that, oh, the pipe operator is useless unless you have the partial application. And so you got the same people who are saying no to the partial application and no to the pipe operator because they rely too much on each other.
Seems like a very circular argument.
Agreed.
We can chat more about it after presentation.
There was a lot of drama though.
All right, so I'm throwing in a couple other models here. just because I know that I need them. This one I'm not doing, but this will represent like what you get back from DNS resolution. And then result would be just tracking, the result of doing the validation for a particular record. So in that case, we want to know if it was valid, and we want to know what the value is. And here I'm using the union type for fun. PHP 8 brought us the union type, sorry, where you can use pipe to specify more than one type as being valid, kind of like a lot of people do in doc blocks anyway. So you can literally just do that now, and PHP knows what's up. So that's handy. All right. Also going to throw down some of these classes that we don't care too much about. If I could type, that would be super helpful. All right, so we have that DNS resolver object here. We're not going to implement it, but it does something like that. And then we can also do logger like it says here. What's cool about PSR3 is that it comes with a trait. And so creating a custom logger, even if you don't want to use like monologue, for example, which is definitely superior to what I'm doing here. It's really easy. You can pretty much, like, this is just something that logs the standard error, and that's the whole thing. The trait covers all the, error warning, info, notice methods. So if you've never done something like that before, that's super easy. So that brings us to Validator, which is our main guy here. Just borrowing things because I haven't learned a better way. All right, so like we kind of showed in the index file, it had two dependencies. We can use the constructor promotion there as well. And want to have a validate method, which you saw it has the root domain and the rule set. So that's what we're going to start with here. Now, what always kind of screws me up if I don't think about it hard enough is a service class. You have to be careful not to give it state. Otherwise, it becomes really, really hard to do anything with, really. It's hard to test, you can't inject it anywhere because then you don't know what state it's supposed to be in there. So keep services stateless and then have another object that encapsulates the state. So that's what I'm doing here. So this is going to internally create something called the validation context, which is going to act as the state for a validation. And it's just going to pass that around to keep track of the state. So there's this top level validate rule set. We pass the context and the rule set, and then it's going to continue on with validation. The context itself, let's go ahead and create that class. For the sake of time, I'm going to drop this all in there. well, I'm going to drop the beginning so that we come back because it's got some of our logic in that we want to look at later. So hold on, let me jump back over here. It's going to have this method. We're going to set this here and come back to it. But another thing in the constructor that we should look at that is new as of 8.1 is the ability to use new inside your inside a property declaration. So we could do this outside the constructor or inside the constructor with the promotion. It works either way. There are some rules about what you can new, and that is that it can't have dependencies. It has to be, you can't new within a new, or maybe you can new within a new, I can't remember. It's tricky, but if it's a very simple instantiation, it works. I have to double check what exactly the rules are, but I know they were kind of weird. Like you can't just throw anything in there.
Wasn't it like you can't new with one of the other properties or something like that?
Yeah, you can't use a variable. It has everything.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has
Or
to
yeah.
be basically static.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, you can use a constant in it though.
Cool.
So
Okay.
if you created a class constant, you can still pass that into the new. Also, for what it's worth, that new fixes a big issue with attributes.
Yes. Yes. That's I think the main driver that they did it, and they're like, oh, this is actually useful generally. So as you can tell, my version of PHP Storm that I just updated today does not support this yet. I have a red underline, but I promise you that it is valid. So PHP Storm is still catching up too. All right, so this will be a context. It's going to store the domain, which is part of the state that we're passing in. It's going to store the rule set, which is part of the state. It's also going to store the results, which is the big part of our state there. And I'm doing that with SPL object storage. That way I can use the rule object as the key and the result object as the value. SPL object storage has been around for a while. It's just not that common. It is kind of cool for use cases like this though, where especially like you have an object that doesn't really have an ID. So you can't use the ID as the key. It just, the ID is the object itself. Internally, it does some kind of hashing algorithm on the object and uses that as a key to a array internally, but we don't care. It just works. All right. So in the validator, I'm going to paste some implementation in here because we are running out of time, but I will walk through it. So the top level validate method calls validate rule set, passed in the validation context and the rule set. Validate rule set is going to be a recursive method. Since we're dealing with a tree structure, you have to handle that recursive structure whenever you're navigating through nodes in that tree. So in our case, different roles within their sets. So this looks at it checks if it's a rule set. If it is, it's going to recurse back into this function again to basically do a depth first navigation down to the leaves. For each of the leaves, it's going to call validate rule instead. It's also going to, once it's done all of its leaf nodes, it will aggregate the results of those to give itself a valid or not valid status. We'll look at that in a second. Actually, yeah, we'll look at that one first. Here we go. So once a rule set has all of its rules validated under it, then it can aggregate those results to itself to have one valid value for the rule set or not. And you'll notice the match here. We're using that as a PHP 8 feature. But we have those two operation types. Enums and match were like born to play with each other. So as you can see within my match, which is a it kind of like a switch statement, but it works like an expression. That's what a match is for. You can have the different cases, and those cases can be enums as well as other types of values. So for my logic, so first of all, I count. We haven't written that method yet, but I count all the rules, and then in the context, we'll implement this. It gets a count of all the rules that are valid, so that way we can compare them with each other. So in the case of the all operator, those should be the same. All of the rules should be valid. In the case of any, we just need at least one valid rule. And then matches, like switches, can also have a default case. And in the default case, we screwed up something because we didn't implement any other operations than just any or all. So it throws an exception. And again, throw can be used as an expression now. So that's why this all kind of works in a very succinct format, which is super nice. And then what we're doing with the context is we take the rule and we add that result. And as you can see, that's using that object storage. It's attaching, rule is the key, result as the value. That's what that's doing. We go back to where we're recursing here. We have the other branch result. If we're actually looking at a leaf node, then we're going to look at validate rule. Actually, I should put this one underneath. So validate rule. This is where we're going to kind of fudge the resolving and validation logic, because we don't really care to implement there right now. But we pass into the resolver the domain of what we're currently validating based off of the rule prefix. And then we also pass in the rule type for the type of record that we're trying to validate. And then that will return us the record for the real record for that, what it's currently at now. And that can be done with a number of different DNS resolution services. And then we create a result. Now, since we don't have any actual validation logic, I'm using random as validation. So it will randomly be valid or not. And then it will create a result with either, if it's valid, then I'll just act like we got the expected value. And if it's not, then I'll just put something bogus like foo or fizz and buzz. Hopefully that makes sense, but we're just kind of hand waving over the actual DNS validation because that's not the focus of what we're doing. And then that also uses that same add result function. So nothing in here is particularly novel in terms of new features. So let's go back to the context because that's basically all we have left. So we used this method. Actually, I'll stick this up here. We used get valid counts when we were counting up what was valid. That's just a simple iteration. I'll throw in the method that it's calling down here, get result. SPL object storage isn't particularly type safe because we don't have generics. So I just wrapped the accessing of the SPL object storage in a method that does declare a return value so that we can use it as intended right here. So like I can chain off the property from it and PHP knows what it is. So anything that's not type safe, generally I just put a little wrapper method around it so that I can actually declare a legit return value. And okay, now let's get into the rest here. We're actually almost done. All right, so here's some more recursion fun. But get validated rule set, sorry, is what the validator class used right here. When we call validate from the outside, it creates the context, it validates the rules, and then from the context, it gets the validated rule set. So we're actually going to, instead of modifying the original objects in the rule set, we're going to create a whole new set of rule sets and rules to keep the immutability of the original objects intact. And so that's what we're going to be doing with these last three methods here. So this is
what's happening on 32? I've never seen syntax with the question marks.
Oh yeah, so this is a new feature in either 8 or 8.1, but that is a new operator which is equivalent to
It's called the no coalescence assignment operator, right?
Yes, no coalescing assignment operator.
Yeah.
But it's basically a shorthand for that. It's useful in a number of situations, but not as many as you would think. So one is where I have this nullable argument and I have a default for it. I've seen it used a lot more with array keys, but that one is a fairly new operation. Was it 7.4 or is it 8? I can't remember.
I think it was 8. I don't think that was 7.4.
Okay.
The null coalescing operator, I think, was 7.4.
This one's 7.4. This one's 8.
Assignment is.
Yeah.
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 It was missing, if I remember right, it was missing in 7.4 by accident.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I remember seeing that discussion. Yeah.
It's supposed to be in 7.4, but they left it out. They forgot to implement it, and so that's why it was an 8. That's why there was no RFC for it as well.
Yeah.
So you won't find an RFC for that because it was already included. It was already supposed to be included in 7.4, and in fact, it was in its patch notes.
Yeah. So here's like what it used to be in 7.3 and below. Then it became this in 7.4, and then it became this in 8. That makes sense, Adam?
Yep, appreciate it.
Okay, cool. So this is a recursive method. I made it nullable because it can default to the internal top level rule set. That's why I'm doing it that way. And then I'm returning a rule set, and I'm sticking the operator from the original rule set. I'm getting the rules from the rule set, which is going to recurse some more. And then I'm sticking the results, whether it's valid in there, because rule set has operation type, rule, and valid. And so I'm pulling the valid from the result, which gets pulled from that SPL object storage using the rule set as a key. So the storage is like a flat list, a flat map of rule or rule set to the result. And then as we return the rule set, which is a recursive structure, we have to basically pull things out of that map and assign it to the new versions of the rule sets and rules. That's what that's doing. So then get rule is I think this is actually, yeah, that's one. This is usually another generator because I like generators. But it also lets me showcase this, which you can flatten not only arrays, but any kind of iterator into an array using this technique. And I think that's as of 7.4, and then 8.1 adds the ability to flatten associative arrays in a similar manner. So we didn't need that in this case, but that is something you can do in 8.1, which is really cool because then it kind of works like it does in JavaScript essentially. But if you've ever used this function, iterator to array, you should never use that again. You don't need it anymore because this is basically doing that.
Starting with 8.1.
No, it's starting in 7.4, I think. Yeah, for that. Or
Oh.
maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Unless the iterator is associative array in nature, and then it won't work. So 8.1 is safe for any array or any iterator. But if it's just a indexed type of thing, then you can use it now.
If it's a list.
Yeah, so list, it works now.
So when we get array as list, we can check to see if we can. No.
True. Yeah. But yeah, essentially, you don't need iterator to array anymore because this is doing the same thing, and it's probably faster because there's no function call. Faster nominally, or not nominally. Yeah. Then okay, so we were recursing. Yes. So within get rules, these are mutually recursive functions. So this one calls this one, and this one can call this one. You have to be careful with those, but it makes sense in this case. It's because cycle detection is harder to detect when you're using mutually recursive functions. Or it can do, instead of doing the rule set, it can just do a rule. In that case, it's using the result and then constructing a new rule record using the previous information and then the stuff from the value. And here I'm just, remember we had that union type on, where'd that go? What did I click on? Result. We had that union type on result. So I am just collapsing that here into a string or null because this only wants a string. But that is the whole set of code, and I'm going to hope that it works. This is still outlined in red, but it's not an error, I promise. Okay. I have that composer script there. It gets me to the Docker container, and then I can do, I'm running this file. And remember, these are our rules, just as a reminder. So we have an all with an any group under it, a regular rule, and another any group. And so to be valid, one of these, that one, and one of these has to be valid. Otherwise, it will be invalid. And remember, the resolution was returning random results, so we'll get different stuff every time. If it works, it did not work. I was afraid of that. Logger. It's an issue with our logger. And validator. Oh, well, we didn't import that. That's a problem. No. contains one abstract method. Oh, I know what's wrong there too. To have an abstract method, you have to make class abstract. I was hoping for third time's a charm. All right. Anyone has any thoughts on that one?
Is it the correct namespace? Yeah.
Thought I did. Let me try this separate. No. What did we do wrong?
Does composer,
Looks like you're missing an import on operation type, maybe.
does composer
It's
auto
in
load?
the
Oh, they're-
same namespace.
Yeah, they're
it
on the
should-
same
yeah.
namespace.
Does composer auto load enums yet? Because
It
Uh,
should, but we could hack that if we need to.
You require once in your index.
Good question. Yes. Oh man, it worked earlier.
what happens if you just require those two enum files?
Well,
Yeah.
let's see if it makes a difference in, at least in the case of rule set. Oh, okay. No, it's everything. Oh wait, that's record type again. What?
You have to require record type as well.
That is in.
I was saying, do it. Just do them both in index.
in
Yeah.
yeah, in the index. Yeah.
All right. Let's do
Double PHP.
that. So that's interesting.
Record type .php.php.
Thank you. Just wanted to be extra sure it was PHP. Aha. All right. So auto loading with enums might be a thing to look out for. Maybe that's a composer issue and not necessarily a PHP issue. That's what I'm guessing.
I'm pretty sure it is because I don't think Composer has said that they work on 8.1 yet.
Yeah. So look out for that. Good to know. I know why this worked earlier is because I had everything in one file. All right. So let's see what happened here. So, you know what, maybe print R would be better in this because that's pretty. Ugh. Less junk. There you go. So, oh, it's invalid. here's our rules. Here it is. It's got current, each of the rules now have current value and value set, which is what we should be wanting to see there. And yeah, a lot of these came back. So that first group came back as valid. The second group, or the second rule, came back as valid. The third group were both invalid. So that one's the one that's causing it to be invalid. Let's try again. Nope. Nope. There we go. So this time we had at least one in that group. So that group became valid. And here, that one's valid. And we had at least one here, and that one's valid, and the whole thing is valid. There we go. Pretty cool. All right. So hopefully that was kind of fun, and you got to see some of the PHP 8 stuff like in actual code that's not like car inherits truck, lion inherits cat examples, which I hate so much. Any questions or anything that you want to look at that maybe went by too fast? I know it's late too, so if the answer is nothing, that's okay too. All right, cool. I'll probably publish this on the azPHP GitHub at some point during the week. If you want to take a closer look at it there. And I guess next month we're going to hear from Ray, sounds like. Yeah, he's gone already. Nope, he's here. Okay,
Yay.
cool. Yeah. Thanks for coming tonight.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was very nice.
Jeremy, good stuff.
All right, no problem. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right, later.
Thanks, Jeremy.